Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Tuesday, October 17th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Penn State game is in 4 days. The game against Michigan in 39 days. Both of those games, Ohio State, Penn State, and Ohio State, Michigan, going to probably have a very big say in who wins the Big Ten, who comes out of the Big Ten into the college football playoff field, and potentially who wins the national championship. And today we're going to be talking about that national championship race again. I know we did this last week and said, I don't want to make a habit out of this, but last week was a pretty big one. 3 unbeaten Power 5 teams lost, one in extremely hilarious fashion in South Bend, Indiana, and also an absolute classic, Oregon and Washington. And Louisville, who I mentally had already written out of the national championship race last week, went ahead and wrote themselves out this week. So thank you very much. Never wrong, Tony Gerdeman. Only early. That's the motto of this show. And we wanted to, before I started the kind of run down the 8 remaining unbeatens, I did want to talk to you about something that you mentioned on our board, the huddle board at BuckeyeHuddle.com this week. We had sort of been assuming all year that based on the Big Ten tiebreaker system, if Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State each went 1-1 against each other, it would get down to the 5th tiebreaker, which is the records of the teams in the opposing division that you played. And looking at it before the season, it looked like Ohio State playing Minnesota and Purdue and Wisconsin was probably going to be in pretty decent shape there. Well, maybe things have taken a little bit of a turn because of Iowa's win over Wisconsin, a 15-6 Brian Ferentz classic. And now, Tony, you did some digging, and right now Penn State is actually maybe in the driver's seat there.
Yeah, and it's the conference record of the Big Ten West opponents, and right now the conference records of Penn State's Big Ten West opponents, a nice 5-6. Ohio State's conference, the record of Ohio State's opponents 4-6, and of course Michigan trailing at 3-7. So now, Michigan's opponents, they don't have a Wisconsin or an Iowa to boost them up like Ohio State and Penn State do, but right now the Iowa Hawkeyes are, if things turn out, obviously with 1 loss each for Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State, the Iowa Hawkeyes could send Penn State to the Big Ten Championship, where they will then play them. And then, you get to pick your opponent, I guess, sort of.
Yeah, the Iowa Hawkeyes are actually shockingly close to maybe being 11-1 and the Big Ten West champions, and also averaging about 17 points a game. I don't know how this is happening. It's all very frightening and confusing. But yeah, you got to remember, in this scenario, Iowa has already lost their game to the Big Ten East team. That loss to Penn State is already baked in. Wisconsin, in this scenario, Wisconsin would have another loss coming to Ohio State in a couple weeks up in Madison. Also just lost starting quarterback Tanner Mordecai, lost one of their big running backs a couple weeks ago. I mean, that is a team that is hurting a little bit. So that this could be a little bit of a paradigm shift. Could be Ohio State fans rooting for Michigan when Michigan plays Penn State. Cats and dogs living together, Tony. I don't. It is the end. The end times are nigh, but we'll see. Ohio State has to get through Penn State first this weekend, and they are. I'm speaking of the end times. I'm going to be citing a ESPN FPI statistic in this show. The percentage chance of each of the 8 unbeaten teams in college football winning out, according to ESPN's FPI stat. Tony, I'm going to give you the 8 remaining unbeaten teams in alphabetical order, and I'm going to have you tell me which one you think has the highest percentage chance of winning out, according to this stat. So let's see. In order, I'm going to try and do this in alphabetical order. Florida State, Georgia, Michigan, North Carolina, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Penn State, and Washington. So those are your 8 remaining unbeaten teams. Which one do you think is judged to have the most? And of course, Oregon, USC, and Louisville all lost last week. So which of those 8 teams do you think has the greatest chance, as judged by ESPN's FPI stat, of going unbeaten the rest of the way?
This is a good question because, and this is including the conference championship game. Do we know that for sure?
Based on this number, I'm going to assume it is not including the conference championship. I believe this is just through the regular season.
Okay. boy, this is tough because surprisingly, Georgia is starting to play some ranked teams coming up on the schedule with the Missouri in there. I think Texas probably has the easiest road, but Oklahoma has a pretty easy road, but they would have to face Texas in a championship game, but that seems to be taking out. I don't expect it to be North Carolina, so and the ACC is not great, Tom, so I think it's all of them. Let me go with Oklahoma.
Oklahoma is, in fact, okay. They are the most likely, according to that stat, 40.8% chance to win out in the regular season, go to the Big 12 championship game. At that point, if you're playing Texas, and I mean, technically it's still in doubt a little bit, but right now it looks very, very likely that that's the case. If that's an unbeaten Oklahoma, a one-loss Texas, that feels very much like a play-in game for the college football playoff at that point, where if Texas is 11-1, has avenged their win over Oklahoma, and they're the Big 12 champion, plus they have a win over Alabama, they would be pretty much impossible to leave out unless there are 4 other conference champions who are unbeaten at that point. And, if Oklahoma wins out, obviously, then they're pretty much a 100% chance to get in. So yes, they are number 1. Now comes number 2, Tony. Who is of the remaining teams? And I'm just going to give you the conferences: ACC, SEC, Pac-12. Who else?
I'm going to say Georgia.
Incorrect. Georgia is actually the 4th most. They have, they have enough. They've played no one so far this year, and sorry. They played Kentucky, and Kentucky was ranked after they beat them, so they must have been incredible before Georgia beat them by 1 million points. But yes, Georgia only 17.2%. Number two is actually Florida State, 30.2%, because they have, they don't, as we talked about last week, they don't play Duke, or they don't play North Carolina. They don't play Louisville. So the 2 other unbeatens in the ACC, or as of last week, the 2 other unbeatens, none of them played each other. So theoretically, you could have had 3 unbeatens. You still could have 2. Florida State's schedule, even with the end of season game against Florida, that's not looking real tough anymore. So, they feel like a team that has a decent chance to get in, and even if they drop one between then and the national and the ACC title game, I think they might still get in with that out of conference win over LSU.
Yeah, I'm with you. Whenever we talk about things like this, and it's like, well, if these 4 teams or these 3 teams go undefeated, and it never really materializes. So it's about a big non-conference win that can allow you to overcome a conference loss. So yeah, Florida State, that makes a lot of sense. I kind of overlooked them looking through this, and that's something I think maybe some people have done over the course of the year with Florida State. They have won first place vote in the AP, but they're kind of just not. They got that LSU win, and then they just mosey on down the road, while everybody else is, having exciting games, and people are paying attention to other programs. They're just going to sit there, and they're very close to being. If you look at the ballots and the voting, they're very close to being number 3 in the nation right now.
And I am going to correct myself. This does include the conference championship game, so that feels ridiculoly high for Oklahoma if you consider, you also include the Texas game there. But we're already 9 minutes into this exercise, so we're going to kind of plow on ahead. Now, what's interesting, Tony, is we've got number 1 Oklahoma, we got number 2 Florida State, we've got number 4 Georgia. We know all of those now. What's interesting is number 3, number 5, and number 7 are all Big Ten East teams. I would like you to try and guess for me which order the 3 Big Ten East teams are in.
I think Ohio State is number 3. Is that correct, Tom? Can you tell me yes?
That is correct, yes. 25.3%.
And here's the thing, because they're viewing Ohio State as winning at Penn State, and then it's a 50-50 shot to win at Michigan. So then I would think maybe having Michigan go to Penn State, are they taking the home field there for the Nittany Lions, baking in a possible Ohio State win to Michigan? How about this, Tom? And this feels way wrong. Is it Penn State at 5?
It is Penn State at 5, Penn State at 14.4%, Michigan just a fraction of a percent below that, 13.9%. But yeah, Michigan does have to go to Penn State. They get Ohio State at home, with the Buckeyes being, the highest of those teams right now. It is how that is not probably the order I would have those in, but this is the exercise we're doing. So there we are. The only team ahead of Michigan, between Penn State and Michigan, is Washington at 14.2, and then North Carolina way down at 7.7. That feels like the check's about to come at some point for North Carolina. Just a matter of when that happens. They still have they have several losable games coming up, and then also would potentially have to play Florida State in the ACC title game. So what's interesting now is you look at the Ohio State Penn State game, and with the thing we talked about earlier, where Penn State potentially now is in the driver's seat in terms of the tiebreaker, this weekend's game is a monster game. This is one we've had circled since January, that this is going to be one of the games that determines not only the Big Ten title, but also potentially the national championship as well, or at least plays into that decision or that result. This just feels like this game is just kind of getting bigger and bigger now that some of the other stakes outside of that have changed. Yeah,
and even the loser of this may not be out of it, but the winner is definitely in the driver's seat, and the winner of this can then perhaps withstand a loss, and because this will be one of the best wins of the season for anybody, so that's something that you can put in there. I did hear on the radio, this is the first time since 2006 that you have two AP top 10 teams playing this late that are both allowing under 10 points per game, and you have to go back to like 1977 for that to be the case for two Big Ten teams allowing under 10 points a game. And then to 1973 to be allowing under 10 points per game and scoring 35 points per game. So just some interesting numbers there. But without any of those numbers, this is a huge game for both of these programs, knowing that Michigan is waiting in the wings for both of them. But that's way on down the road. Like, this is the most important game of the week. And I think we said it we said it earlier last week. Like, it's going to be a rock fight. This is going to be, I don't think it's going to be a very pretty game, but it's actually going to be, it's going to be a very huge game. It's not going to be necessarily pleasing to the eye in terms of the football prowess of these offenses.
Well, you mentioned the precedent of the first time since 1973. Maybe Ohio State can get this Big Ten tiebreaker decided by a vote of the athletic directors. That worked out just fine for Ohio State back then. Might work out this year. Probably not. It's interesting, though, that because you mentioned that this could very well be a rock fight, and a lot of the projections have this as a 24-20 type game, 24-17. If it is low scoring and it is close, that certainly would be good news for the losing team in terms of, there is no one is going to feel happy about a loss or a close loss in this one. But long term, you'd much rather lose a game 20-17 than have a higher score game that you end up losing by 2 touchdowns or 17 points or something like that. Because that's one of those ones where the committee points to that and goes, well, they weren't really competitive in this game, or they weren't really competitive for 3 quarters or something like that. A close, low-scoring game probably helps. I mean, whatever win helps the winning team, obviously. But a close, low-scoring game might actually be beneficial to the team that loses as well.
Yeah, for sure. And especially if that losing team is Penn State, to lose on the road at the number 3 team in the nation. That's something that is the committee likes those kinds of losses, and they're certainly better than most of the Big Ten wins that we've seen this year with these schedules that the teams are playing. So that's, you lose this game, it's not over for you, especially if Iowa wins the Big Ten championship. Let's throw that one out there, Tom. What happens to the playoffs if Iowa wins the Big Ten championship? Is it at that point a 12-1 Iowa team? I would be perfectly okay with leaving a 12-1 Big Ten champ out of the playoffs if it is Iowa.
I mean, I would be completely fine with that, because I don't want to. I mean, we've kind of seen what happens to Iowa on the big stage in those kind of moments, haven't we? Does everyone remember the Christian McCaffrey Rose Bowl that was exciting for about 6.5 minutes? This Iowa team has a very, very, very good defense, but It's also when you're playing teams with good offenses, and they really have not played a ton of teams with good offenses. Penn State, really the only exception, and they get thumped pretty good by Penn State. That doesn't feel like that's going to hold up for 60 minutes against a better team. But, we're a long way from a 12-1 Big Ten champion Iowa. Oh, let's hope we remain a long way from a 12-1 Big Ten champion Iowa. But we will figure out who likely Iowa will play in Indianapolis. We will have one big piece of that puzzle coming up on Saturday as the Buckeyes and Nittany Lions square off in Columbus. Kickoff at noon on Fox. Big noon kickoff. Very big game. We will be there, of course. We'll have coverage all week this week, starting with the Ryan Day press conference on Tuesday. We'll have that at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. We'll have coverage coming up of the player interviews on Wednesday night, and plenty of all of your normal features during the week. We'll have all that stuff heading up to to that big game on Saturday, and then of course our usual post game coverage as well. Should be quite an eventful day, quite an eventful post game show, win or lose. So you'll want to be subscribed there at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. And of course at BuckeyeHuddle.com as well. We've got this is going to be a very, very big recruiting week as well. Mark Giffler will be all over that for us on the huddle board at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Very big recruiting weekend, very big football weekend, game weekend, very big national championship picture weekend, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.